All right, let's get started. Welcome to season two. Welcome to season two, episode one of Third Song In podcast with Chris Erickson and Tom Polachek.
Welcome back. I would like to say hello to our multitudes of listeners. Our episode topic for our first episode of season two is the Beer Curve Part 2. It's more stories about drinking and parties and college in the 80s, which I have so many potential stories that I think we're destined for a part 3 of this one. The story that I wanted to kind of share initially, though, was my 21st birthday, which would have been 1987. So May of 1987 is when I turned 21. Is actually, I believe, when you turned 21, a couple weeks after me. But what I recall from my birthday was going to this tiny little bar that was south of campus on Big Bend, I think, called the Sports Attic. And it was literally a neighborhood bar. And I don't know how we started going there, because I can tell you we were not welcome there. It was definitely like a local neighborhood bar. Big Bend is a main drag. So it could have been a bigger place, but it was a really small building. You went there, right? I don't think you were there for my birthday, actually.
I was not for your birthday, no.
But I know we would go there and we watched games there, but it was tiny. It probably only had like 20 tables total in the whole place. And it wasn't, as far as I remember, it didn't serve food or anything. It was just a pub, just a tavern. And we went in on the evening of my 21st birthday. We probably got there about 10. I think we'd been celebrating elsewhere up till that point. And I was already hammered. We walked in, and I think everybody was kind of dressed the same, which, looking back on it, seemed like just intentionally to piss off the locals that were there. Because I think I had one of those Madras button-down shirts on with a pair of shorts that look like tennis shorts, and a pair of high tops, and I mean we couldn't have looked more like ridiculous college students, frat boys than you. I mean, if we had tried to, I don't think we could have looked any sillier than we did when we went in. And we went into the bar, and there must have been about a half a dozen of us, including a couple guys who I knew real well, but who had graduated the year before. And we started doing shots and drinking, and we must have been there for 2 hours. And I, at that time of my life, was one of the happiest drunks that you would ever see. I never got depressed when I drank. I rarely, anyway. I never wanted to fight. I was always just, and particularly that night, because it was my 21st birthday, I was having the time of my life. I couldn't have been happier. And when they turned on the lights and told us we had to go, we didn't go right away, of course. And we were pissing off the bartender and the regulars who were still there. So we walked out of the bar, and I remember I still had a bottle of Budweiser in my hand, like a long neck bottle. And we had been loud and obnoxious the whole time. We went out onto the sidewalk right on Big Ben. And this was the kind of bar where at closing time, the Clayton cops would park down Big Ben, because they were always waiting for something bad to happen there, which I didn't know before this, but found out it pretty quick after this. So I was standing on the parking lot, and one of the local guys, just a working class dude who was probably about 5 or 6 years older than me, he said something to me that I probably didn't even understand at the time. I certainly don't remember what it was now. And I made fun of him in response as a joke, and called him a clown or did something, but not like obnoxiously and not aggressively. I said it, and I remember saying it and smiling, and then he punched me right in the face. And he wasn't taller than me. He might have weighed what I weighed, but I stepped backwards after he punched me, and I looked at him and I said, "You punched me." And he said again something else incomprehensible to me. And as he approached me, I grabbed him, and I was a lot stronger than he was. And I took a step forward. I had him in both hands, but I still had the beer bottle in one hand. And when he pitched over backwards, I went forward on top of him. and the bottle exploded on the concrete in my hand. And I rolled off of him at that point, and somebody who was with me, one of the other guys from the fraternity house, picked me up by my shoulders, and I was standing there, and you could see the cop lights came on in the cars that were about a block down the way, and they pulled up. And at the same time I was going through this, a guy named, well, I won't give his name because I don't want to embarrass him, but a guy who was, I think he was a senior when we were freshmen, was so drunk that he was on the other side of the street in the gutter doing the worm. And what he was doing was so bizarre that he took all of the cops' attention away, and two guys grabbed me by the shoulders and hustled me away from that and down an alley and like back around the block to get to a car. And literally this guy who shall go unnamed saved my ass. He didn't get arrested. He didn't get in trouble, but I probably would have, because we were literally in a fight, even though I didn't realize we were in a fight until it was long over. But the bigger problem is that my hand was bleeding like crazy. And they took me from the sports attic to Barnes Hospital emergency room. And I had, for the longest time, I lost it decades ago at this point, but I had a hospital wristband, identification band from the emergency room with my 21st birth date on it, because they had to pull all kinds of glass out of my hand. And you can't really, I think I got one stitch or something like that, but they basically had to clean me all up, pull out the glass that was embedded in my hand, and send me out. So about, I think I finally got discharged about 3 or 4 a.m. the day after my birthday. But my wristband itself had the day and date of my 21st birthday on it. And ironically, there was a piece of glass that stayed in there until about 30 years later. I finally went to a hand specialist because it was bothering me, because I had kind of a lump in that particular finger. And he went in and dug around and found the piece of glass that had been there since I turned 21. So that is just yet another example of the stupidity and slight arrogance, I would say, of the Washington University underclassmen at that time and in those days.
Slight arrogance? I find that so hard to believe.
I swear to God, I thought this guy and we were having the best time. I thought I had made a new best friend with him. We were joking back and forth, just like you and I would joke. I was, razzing him, and I thought he was razzing me back, but he wasn't razzing me back. He was getting really pissed off and punched me right in the fucking nose.
The other party that I missed, that I'm now really jealous about, is the mobile party. You want to give me a little rundown on that?
Yeah, and I could have sworn that Mobile Party was a creation my junior year, along with a guy named Mike, who I played football with at WashU. We were again in the same fraternity. I thought we invented it junior year and then did it my junior year and my senior year. He was a year behind me. But the gist of it was Mike and I, at some point, ran across a shopping cart. And I probably from Schnucks. That's the grocery store chain in St. Louis. And I don't know, but it wasn't at Schnucks. It was like on the street near our fraternity house. I'm sure somebody had stolen it and whatever. So
was there a couch next to it?
Let's say again.
Was there a couch next to
it? So anyway, we found, but it was one of those shopping carts where the top basket was not as deep as like your traditional shopping cart, and it would flip up. And I think that's so they could roll a bunch of them together, but it would flip up on a hinge up and down. And so what Mike and I did after we, engineered this and thought about it for a while is we cut a circular hole in the middle of the basket. And then what we did is we took a tub and put a keg in it, a beer keg. Then we closed the basket or hinged it down so it was back in its normal position. And then we tapped the keg through the basket. We then got a whole bunch of Solo plastic cups, which are still the cup of choice, I believe, on college campuses everywhere. And I think we threw a bunch of bags of potato chips and pretzels and that kind of stuff, and then a boombox. And on the final day of finals at WashU, because they would, as I'm sure they do now, there's about a week's long worth of finals. So it was probably a Friday, which would have been the last day of finals for that semester. We took the shopping cart, we tapped the keg, and we started pushing it around campus. And we had a list. Mike had gotten a list of everybody who wanted to take part and where their final was and what time it got out. So we started about 11 a.m. and pushed this cart with music blasting all around campus. And we would just wait outside the building of, where the physics final was, or where the bio final was, or the English final. And we slowly, from 11 a.m. until, probably 3 or 4, we picked up another 10 or 12 people that we intended to pick up, and probably another 10 or 12 people who just hung out with us. We had a Frisbee and a football in the basket, and we just went all the way around the campus, picking up people as their finals got out. And it was one of the most fun. It was a beautiful spring day. It was absolutely awesome. And I think for myself and for Mike, probably our greatest accomplishment as undergrads was the creation and execution of the mobile party. And it went so well that I know we did it the next year. Like I said, I think the next year was my senior year. And as I understand it, he did it at least one more year after I graduated. So we probably drank and partied too much, as do most college kids, but we were also, I felt, very creative at times in how we were able to get people involved and do our drinking.
If only I'd known, then I would have had motivation to go to finals.
Exactly. That might have gotten you there. It was the best, man. People would come walking out of like where I want to say it was probably like calculus finals or that kind, because it was that building, like where they had the big auditorium type places, and you would have to take your final there because there were so many kids in those classes, and you'd see people come out and their faces would just brighten up, And we did have to turn the music off at one point because we got yelled at by some professor or administrator who was, pissed that we were creating kind of havoc. But we didn't leave; we just turned the music down.
That probably would have been a much safer environment for me than the next story. When you and I both tried like crazy to find the name of this bar. It was what we do remember is it had been a bank at one time, and they kept the vault. And I think the way it was set up is the vault door was open, and it was very well done. It kind of seemed kind of upscale. It wasn't, but it seemed kind of upscale. And it was more of a dance club, so we didn't go much, but we had heard through friends that we think female friends that they had a special. It was $10 all you could drink, so we couldn't pass that up. We went one night. I'm never one to not get my money's worth, so I think I definitely did. And two stories that are just hilarious, because I'm not the only one who got their money's worth, but I have told this particular story to so many people over the course of my life. It belongs in a movie or something. It's just a great story. Not the first part. So people will talk to me whether I'm a happy drunk or not a happy drunk, and it varies. I've had my moments, but I'm kind of a smart ass. I mean, as you probably noticed on the podcast,
only when you're drunk. Only when you're drunk are you smart.
Only when I'm drunk. But my humor is even better when I'm drunk. So I was going down we were both probably going down the bathroom. I made it out first. I have no idea what I said, but I said something to some guy who wanted to punch me in the face, probably just like you got punched in the face. And I'm just like clueless as to, what I'm going to do. 2 seconds later, you come out of the bathroom, see the situation I'm in, put your forearm under the guy's chin, pinned him against the wall, and said something like, "We got a problem here?" It's like, I don't think so. So I was like, yeah. So for those who don't see the video or know us, Tom's a little bit bigger than I am, stature-wise, and he was my backup in those situations where I was too dumb to know that I was starting a fight. But that isn't the best story. That was just a semi-typical night out. The best one was we're in the club. We're not dancing at the time. We're at one of those tall round tables, and there's a guy's full drink and pretty close to a full pack of cigarettes. Tom, for whatever reason, goes over, takes the entire pack of cigarettes, puts it all in your mouth, and you light them all up and take a puff. You probably coughed like crazy. And you're like, oh, shit. And you took them out and you put them in the drink. And we didn't exactly run away because I don't think we even realized.
We stayed at the table or wherever we were.
Standing close to the table. And this guy comes over from the dance floor, looks at his empty pack of cigarettes, and then over at his drink that is filled with burnt cigarettes. And I don't know what he said, but he's almost like, what the fuck? And Tom looked at him and shrugged his shoulders like, whatever. It was
I feel like I gave him the best John Belushi shrug I've ever given in my
it
life.
was easily one of my favorite stories. If only we could remember the name of the place, but I'm sure maybe one of our friends that listens to this will chime in
I hope so.
post facto next week.
Yeah, I actually texted a few people. I spent time online trying to. I found a picture of the front of a place that I am positive was that bar, and the information I got from that post was that it was at one point it was called the Vault, but that was like in the 2000s. And the article said it was called something before it was the Vault, but that was like in the 90s. And we're talking about mid to late 80s that we were there. And I think it was like a guy's name, like Michaels or something like that. And I'm hoping somebody will remember. As you said, it's not a place that we went to a lot, or that even WashU people went to a lot, but they would have those drink specials, and it would draw people in. I tell that story frequently also, mainly because two of those things happened at the same time. And then, by the way, when we were done, I think we closed the place down, we started to walk home, and it was like 5 miles back from where we were. And I believe you smooth talked somebody, some girl that we had never met before, and we got a ride at least to campus, if not all the way back to the fraternities. If she was smart, she wouldn't have taken us all the way home, but
I was a dick to guys, but I was pretty good with girls.
Yeah, I remember you saved me a lot of shoe leather on that night, because I don't think we would have made it, man. I was hammered.
All righty, that takes us to our question of the week. Jonathan from, of all places, Shoulder Blade, Kentucky, is writing in asking us, what is the worst situation you created due to drinking? So mine seems a little, well, it was definitely scarier and dangerous, but in the end, it wasn't as bad. So fortunately, when I was in college, I was home for the summer. My parents went out of town, which was a bad idea. And I had a couple parties. And at one of them, there was a girl that I was interested in, and she didn't have a ride home because all of her friends abandoned her. So I said I would drive her home. I did. I was very respectful. I didn't do anything, just drove her home. I think she may have given me a kiss on the cheek or something, nothing, beyond that. So I'm like, all right. And so this is, 1985, 86, something like that, way before GPS. And I pull out, I have no freaking clue where I'm going. So I got there because she told me how to get there, and I wasn't really paying that much attention, and I'd probably had a drink or two too many. So I'm driving, and I can't see. One, I don't know where I'm going. Two, I can't really see super well, probably because I'd had more than one or two drinks too many. And I was like, I just needed to know what the street sign was. So I stopped my car, got out of the car, climbed the street sign so I could read it. So I'm on the top. I'm on the top of the street sign. I must have read it. And the next thing that I remember is pulling into my driveway at home. I don't remember anything in between then. I didn't obviously get pulled over. People maybe listen to this. This is not recommended.
No, of course.
I learned, this was that moment where I'm like, holy shit, lesson learned. That was not a good idea. But that could have been a whole lot worse for me, for people along the way. I only laugh at the complete absurdity of it, and that I was lucky enough to get home. So
I could just picture you shitting your way up this time. That's so funny. Oh, that's great. Well, I've created a number of bad situations, and one of the reasons I don't drink as much now as I used to is because you learn those lessons. But I do recall when we were in school, this was prior to either fraternity or sorority dance, like either I'm going to guess it was a semi-formal. It could have been a formal. And I had a date, and our friend Andy, future guest, we hope, Andy, had a date, and we were driving his date's car. And when I say we, he was driving, they were in front, and my date and I were in the back seat. And we pre-partied at, I think, my date's room, and didn't eat anything and drank way too much, or at least I did. I actually don't think Andy had that much to drink because he did know he was driving, and he was always more responsible than the rest of us. So we're in this vehicle and we're headed to wherever the party was. I don't remember. But we're driving down a street right next to campus on our way to that semi-formal. And we're joking and laughing and we're having a great time. And I'm sure I'm having a better time than everybody else in the vehicle. And at one point, I'm telling a story, and this was in the winter, I remember. So it would have been like end of first semester. I reached up to make my point in telling the story to Andy. I was sitting directly behind him, and I grabbed his shoulder to tell him. And as a result of me grabbing his shoulder, his hands on the steering wheel jerked to the right. He lost control of the vehicle on, I assume, ice, jumped the curb, and we drove directly into a tree.
Mm.
Now, luckily, he was only doing about 20 miles an hour, and we were all, I believe we were all in seatbelts because I don't think, nobody got thrown around too badly. But we did a lot of damage to the vehicle. And again, luckily, Andy was sober. I don't even remember the cops showing up, by the way. I don't really remember how we cleared the scene of that accident. What I do remember is that his date, although she had a seatbelt on, she was thrown forward and hit her face on the dash and broke her nose.
Mm.
And as a result of that, ended up having rhinoplasty done, which was her dream come true. She was so happy that she got to have a nose job out of this that I ended up coming out like a hero out of this, out of the ridiculous behavior I showed in that car. But it is without a doubt the worst situation I created. We were so lucky, as in, I mean, how many times do we tell stories about back then where we have to say how lucky we are because things could have gone so much worse, so much horribly worse. I don't think we made it back. I don't think we went to the party. I think she had to go to the emergency room, but she ended up getting a nose job. She was much happier with the end result.
All right, this brings us now to our recommendations. So season 2, episode 1. So for those who are joining us for the first time, what we do is we try to make recommendations that fit the theme of the episode, from anything that's pre-2000. So we're usually generally trying to find something in our college days or shortly thereafter. But as a cutoff, we went to 2000. So those are the ones from then. It can be movies, it can be books, it can be songs, any sort of cultural reference TV shows. And then we have a section where we'll do recommendations from now. So that's anything post 2000. Same thing. So Tom, why don't you go ahead and kick us off for the first recommendation for season 2?
So what we've tried to do, and certainly in the last few episodes of the last season, these recommendations have been we've tried to relate them to the theme of the podcast itself. And I had an honorable mention from back then, which I think you may want to discuss a little bit as well. One of the very first thing I thought of was a film called Barfly from 1987, which had Mickey Rourke in it and Faye Dunaway. It was directed by Barbette Schroeder. Well, all I would say is that it is a depressing movie, but it's absolutely, it's a movie that if you haven't seen, you ought to see it. But I decided for the first episode, I wanted to go a little bit more upbeat. So I've recommended what may be my favorite comedy of all time. It is certainly the comedy that makes me laugh the most every time I watch it, including as recently as 6 months ago. And that's a movie called Arthur from 1981. It was written and directed by Steve Gordon. It starred Dudley Moore in the starring role of Arthur, who was a multi-millionaire, billionaire, just a child in a man's body. It also starred Liza Minnelli as the romantic lead, which still surprises me, and Sir John Gielgud as the butler who had been taking care of Dudley Moore since he was a child. It is without a doubt one of the funniest movies, or one of the movies that makes me laugh the most laughs per minute I think I've ever had in a film. Dudley Moore is so funny. I don't think he ever reached that level again, but he is so funny playing a constantly drunk Arthur. Uh, it- Practically every time he opened his mouth or lifted his eyebrows, I laughed. I saw it in the theater. I've probably seen it 5, 8, 10 times in my life since then. And I thought about it not too long ago because I was listening to another podcast that said, "What's the movie that makes you laugh the most?" And somebody mentioned Arthur, which I'd kind of forgotten about. And I thought, yeah, you know what? I really did love that movie. And I watched it within a week of hearing it on the podcast, and I had tears in my eyes, and I knew every line. Like I knew it was coming, and it made no difference. He just would turn the simplest jokes into these hilarious pantomimes of his, and it all had to do with just him acting drunk the whole time. And no one, I don't think anyone's ever done it better than him before that or since then. And I have to give that 5 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream, which is how we rate our pop culture in this podcast. And I highly recommend that you go back and look for Arthur from 1981. There is a remake from the sometime in the mid 2000 or early 2000s that is not worth watching.
Yeah.
It's, I guess I see why they tried to redo it, but that movie was successful only because of Dudley Moore, and I don't think anybody else could ever pull it off.
Yeah, that's a fantastic choice. I almost chose that for part one of this topic and didn't. I was saving it. It's like a draft. We hope it'll come back to you, but it didn't come back to me. But I agree. I haven't gone back and watched it. I just wonder how it would hold up. I haven't seen the remake either, because it certainly delighted in the drunkenness. I mean, there was a lot of drinking.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I guess but there's also some really tender moments, especially between him and the butler. And it's a really hilarious and in the end heartwarming story. And you're right. I mean, Dudley Moore reached his peak, I think, with that movie. It was fantastic. It was great. Nice choice. All right. I did not choose Barfly. That was actually going to be my choice. And I made the decision not to, even when I knew that you were still thinking about it and probably weren't going to pick it. And the reason is at least some people are saying that I'm far too depressing in all my choices. So I chose a much more uplifting song. I chose a song. Tom's definitely more of the knowledgeable one when it comes to movies. I'm okay on TV, but I fancy myself, knowing a decent amount about music. I couldn't read a lyric or a note if it hit me in the forehead. I'm not a musician. I don't really know enough about the music itself, but I love lyrics and songs. So I went with a song from the band The Jayhawks, and it sort of goes back to some other things we talked about where albums are republished, music that people haven't had access to for a while. This song is from their first album, and it was recorded in the Burke House. So it's come to be known as the Burke House album. But the song title is "The Liquor Store Came First." Very good Jayhawk song. Lyrics like, the drinking is what's causing him and his girlfriend or wife, whatever it is, pain. The liquor store came first and drove my baby from my arms. It was all a game that led me down that road. The liquor store came first. So it's not much more complicated than that throughout the other verses. But what I really like about the song, and it has a roughness to it that I think I sort of forgot about with the Jayhawks. So the Jayhawks, for those who haven't listened to them, rose to popularity in the 80s and 90s. They had two really great lead singers, Gary Loris and Mark Olson, that did some of the best harmonizing that I'm aware of. So albums, and I so much remember, and making this choice reminded me. So in 1992, the album Hollywood Town Hall is one of my favorites. And the opening songs of all of their albums are just great. So Waiting for the Sun is the opening song of that one. And then the next album after that was also really solid. Tomorrow the Green Grass, which was in 1995. And it's funny because that album I loved, and then it ended up being one of the reasons I abandoned the Jayhawks, at least listening to them, for a couple of reasons. Mark Olson left the band, and then he came back, and then he left again. So he lost some of that harmonizing, but it was almost too sweet, too perfect. And I liked it and do like it. And I've actually gone back now because of this episode and listened to those albums. But Blue sort of typifies it for me. I can't remember. I think there was another little super group of Americana artists, which again, we know that's an oxymoron. It was terrible. I was like, it was just, it ruined the song for me, and it started making me, it's just a little too smooth. But this song, The Liquor Store Came First, has that edge to it. They're not as smooth. It's not that perfect harmonizing. It's just a really great, Americana song, good roots rock song, whatever you want to call it. It's not upbeat, but it reminds me of, as bands are rising and making their name, they go through, ideally they go through these different stages. And again, Hollywood Town Hall and Tomorrow the Green Grass Grows are great albums, and I loved them at the time. But this choice for this podcast has made me go back and revisit. And they just put out a new album just a couple of years ago. So I think Mark Olson is no longer with the band, but Gary Loris is still going along strong. So that's my choice from them.
Yeah, I'm a giant Jayhawks fan, and I forget about that album. I have to go back and listen to that song again because I don't recall it. But I actually pulled up the album while you were talking, and it's so funny because you could have picked that song. There's a song called Misery Tavern. There's a song called Six Pack on the Dashboard. They definitely had a theme themselves when they got started.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's funny because I'm with you. They're one of the few Americana bands, early alt country bands that I like and liked then, who actually have really nice singing voices. Gary Loris has a kind of a sweeter voice than typically that I like, and I know you feel the same way about it. But I saw them play at Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago probably only about 2 or 3 years ago, and I think you're right. I think it was just Loris and then whoever he's assembled around him as Jayhawks. But they were great, and that's a really cool venue because it's really small and they're basically playing acoustic. But I just about anything the Jayhawks play, I'm a fan of. So I am going to listen to that as soon as I get home tonight. We haven't reached season 4 yet, so you still need to give an Egg Burritos with Sour Cream rating for Liquor Store Came First.
I'm going to give it 4 out of 5. I think it's a good, solid song. I would give some songs from those 2 albums I mentioned 5s, but it's a good choice. I can't believe I forgot again. I just put my head down. All right, let's go to now, and I promise you, I will remember to rate my movie, which I did choose a movie.
So I chose a movie kind of as an honorable mention. I'll just mention it real quickly. There's a movie from 2013 called Drinking Buddies, starring Jake Johnson, Olivia Munn, and Ron Swanson. That's a movie I would probably give only 3 out of 5 Egg Burritos with Sour Cream, but it's a cool little indie flick about a bunch of people who work at a microbrew in Chicago. And mainly just about any movie I've ever seen Jake Johnson in is worthwhile seeing. I think he's just really a funny guy. He's like the male lead in the ensemble that was The New Girl, the TV show, The New Girl. I just think he's great. I think he's really funny in this one. And it's very much about, kind of lives that are all just connected with beer, the making of beer and the drinking of beer. But it's also a romantic comedy, and it feels very indie, which I always like. It's kind of a small movie, but that was my honorable mention. What I want to recommend though, is a book. It's a memoir by Augusten Burroughs. I think it's an award-winning book. I didn't actually check to see. I mean, I don't think it won like Nobel Prize in literature or anything like that, but it's called Dry. And oddly enough, it was his second memoir. It's about his life when he was in the 20s, and he wrote it kind of contemporaneously with the events that he describes there. So it's amazing to me that the guy wrote 2 memoirs by the time he was like 30 years old. Augusten Burroughs the memoir is him describing his life as a drinker of alcohol. He was a very, very successful young man in the advertising business in New York City. And he lived kind of the high life, and he had, he had an account, business account. He could, expense account. He could pretty much drink and eat whatever he wanted. And it basically is about him spiraling into alcohol as his entire life, just drinking literally bottles and liters of booze on a daily basis, waking up and drinking, or staying out until 4 a.m. and drinking and showing up at work drunk and pulling it off for a really long time. But Dry is a memoir about how he eventually realizes that he needs help, and he goes to a facility, and he has certain expectations about how it was going to be like this cool, because there's a really well-heeled rehab facility. He thought he'd be getting sober along with a bunch of movie stars, and none of that happened. But it's weird because Burroughs is not someone that I can really relate to. He's very successful and very wealthy in the advertising business, lived in in New York City as opposed to the suburbs like I live. He's a gay man, and a lot of this is about that culture in New York City at that time when he was that age, and how alcohol kind of fuels everything. So I don't really relate to the facts and circumstances of his situation, but he writes with such humor, and he writes with a lot of pathos. And I have quite a few people in my family who have dealt with addiction in one way or another, much of it alcohol and other substances. And it was a really, really interesting look into what the hardcore drinker is thinking and feeling when they drink, and how they feel when they're trying to stop, and how they feel when they fall off the wagon. And it is really, really an interesting read. And again, this is a recommendation. The book came out I think it was first published in 2003. It's not a surprise. I think it was on the New York Times bestseller list, all that kind of stuff. But I only recently read it, and I now understand why it was so highly recommended, because I do think it's very good. And I would give it 4 out of 5 egg burritos with sour cream. Because as I said, I think it really, even though not everybody is a wealthy gay advertising executive, the core emotions and the things that he talks about are fairly universal. And he certainly knows how to write, and he certainly knows how to bring you into his world in a way that makes it really very interesting.
Nice job, you literary person, you.
So how about that, huh?
All right, well, I'm going to go in a little bit different direction, I think. So I keep trying to be a little more upbeat, and I'm just not succeeding. So my choice for now is, I think it was a little overlooked, but it's a movie called Rough Night. It was made in 2017. It was directed by, hopefully I pronounce this right, Lucia Aniello. She's best known for her work on the comedy series Hacks, which I am maybe embarrassed, or at least, have to admit that I'm not aware of. Apparently it won several Emmys. So it's got that going for it. This was the first movie that she did. It stars Scarlett Johansson and Kate McKinnon, who is hilarious. And there's a guest appearance by Demi Moore. So it's not an overly original movie. I think what distinguishes it in some ways is that it's kind of dark. I mean, it's a dark comedy. So quick story is Scarlett Johansson's character, I think her name is Jess, is an up-and-coming politician. She's engaged, everything's going great. So she decides to get together with some college buddies. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. They go out partying, and Kate McKinnon plays her foreign exchange student that she got to know during college, and just has some of the funniest scenes. So basically they get this VRBO, I think, and they're hanging out. They go to a club, get into some cocaine, and sort of lose it. They decide to call in a male stripper. A guy shows up, who they think is the stripper, and start getting a little frisky with them. He makes Jess, Scarlett Johansson, a little uncomfortable, so she backs off. But one of the other women like just jumps on him because she's all excited, knocks him over in his chair, he hits his head on the fireplace, and he dies. So the rest of the movie is trying to figure out what the hell to do with this body, because Scarlett Johansson can't have this on her record. I mean, she's a politician.
Huh.
And then there's a lot more farce involved where her fiance thinks that she's cheating on him because she's being all secretive about what's going on. One of the women, her father's a lawyer. They call him. He's like, you got to get rid of the body. So Kate McKinnon's character tries to ride the body out on a jet ski into the ocean and drop it off. And within a little bit of time, it just washes back up. Kate McKinnon has a fantastic wipeout when she drives the jet ski back onto the beach and just face plants. That's easily one of my favorite scenes. But dark comedy, humorous, and not that you don't see dark comedy with women, but I like the fact that it was edgy, and it has some really funny moments. Some bad choices after bad choices, but well worth a watch. I do remember to give it a rating. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. It's a good solid watch. It has its moments, good acting. It just continues to build upon itself because someone who shows up a little bit later is the police officer. I think he's coming to investigate the murder, and he's actually the stripper, so they don't know at the time who they actually killed. So, so I won't ruin it. Not that there's much to ruin, but that was my choice. So a little upbeat. So for those who might suggest that we try, in the future to be a little more upbeat and lively with our choices. I was
Got
halfway.
some comedies in there, right?
Yeah, no
Yeah,
shit.
not too bad. By the way, I looked it up because I know nothing about that movie. It seems like it would have come across my radar. So I was checking, and it is currently streaming on Stars, and
Okay.
otherwise you can rent it on Amazon or Apple TV or all that kind of stuff, or iTunes, whatever you call it. But I'm going to watch that. In fact, I may watch that this evening because it sounds hilarious to me. I know there's a male version of that exact same story.
Exactly.
I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it's probably from like the 90s.
It goes along with what we talked about in one of our previous episodes, that everything's just a remake of another story. So it's not original. It does have good acting though, and there are some really funny moments.
Actually, maybe it might have been an episode of Three's Company.
It might have been. There was a big misunderstanding over, but I don't remember anybody getting killed in Three's Company.
Yeah, they used to hide that part.
Which brings us to our next segment, which we call Post Facto.
It's a mistake. It's a mistake.
And our Post Facto segment, we cover mistakes, oversights. If you listen long enough, you'll hear me pause for like 10 seconds, being like, I can't remember the name of it. So then I'll tell you the name of it in the next episode. And a lot of this is in our first season. Tom and I took a lot of pride in the fact that we don't do a lot, if any, research ahead of time. We're kind of committed to doing a little research this time, so we have fewer.
Just a little.
Let's be true. Let's be truthful here. We have 7 post facto right now. So maybe, but that is still from season 1. That's carryover from before. So I'll start.
We're much better now.
Mine's easy. I just was too quick to try to criticize Trump. And I had mentioned when I was talking about TV series that had started in England or Britain, and were copied in the US, that Undercover Boss was such a show. And I said that someone was on there that we don't like. And I think I muttered the word Trump. He was not on that show, as far as I'm aware. I kind of laugh about, Donald Trump trying to dress up so that people don't recognize him. But no, it was more, he was the apprentice. He was on The Apprentice, I believe. So
right.
You're fired. So sorry about that, folks.
Yep. Let me do one. Actually, I'm decided to do this or mention this only because it gives people a little insight into, as I said in our episode outline, how the sausage is made here. When we talked last episode, final episode of last season, we discussed Brown Eyed Girl, the cover song of Van Morrison that Lagwagon did. And my response, my immediate response, because I listened to it just before the episode, was I listened to it once and I told you that, it wasn't up really, up my alley. It wasn't quite what I was, a little too heavy, what have you. And then I listened to it again, I think probably in the process of editing that episode. And I completely changed my mind. And I realized I really like that song a lot. So what I did was I cut out the part where I said I didn't like it. So nobody got to hear me say I didn't like the song because I decided I liked it and I didn't want to sound like an idiot. So now I'm admitting to you that I am an idiot, and or at least that I'm willing to listen more than once and maybe change my mind about something.
Nice work. All right, I'll take one, and this one is fully deserved. So a frequent listener and good friend of the show and former roommate of Tom's and mine, Joe Pay, reached out to Tom after listening to, I think, our last episode and said that he was extremely disappointed in me for not knowing that Metallica had done a cover of Turn the Page. Joe, I fall on my sword. You're 100% right. I have no idea how I didn't know that.
What else? Oh, since I've admitted one song of yours that I ended up liking, the other thing I wanted to point out, and this is not a correction, it was not a mistake by any means. I don't think I made any comment whatsoever, but you recommended the EP by Wild Rivers when we were talking about covers, and that was an EP where they covered their own stuff, except they just did it acoustically. And I did not get a chance to listen to that before the episode, and I've listened to it since then. And I haven't just listened to it once, I've probably listened to it 5 times. That EP and all 3 of those songs are so good. I really, really like it. And that's what you said in the last episode. And you and I, we tend to agree on these kind of things. But in particular, you talked a lot about the second song, which was sung by the male of the two, which I really, really like. But boy, that first song that she sings, it's just absolutely beautiful. And I just figured it was worthwhile to again, agree with you and underscore that people really ought to listen to that EP. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and it was one of those where I remember early on, their stuff would show up like when I'm just like, hitting when Spotify generating a list for me. I'm like, I don't like this. And then it keeps showing up, and then, it's not too bad. And then, I don't know, one of those songs came up and I was like, this is really good. Why didn't anybody tell me about this?
Yeah,
So
never heard of them, never heard their music.
Yeah, they're Canadian, dude.
Yeah, we
So
may
is
have to take a road trip.
artist for my playlist, but we'll get there in a second.
Okay.
Joe Pay is doing a lot of help for the show. He's probably the one that actually does research. But he also reached out to Tom. Joe Pay can reach out to me too, man, just so you know. Because I tend to say some of the stupid stuff. But Michael Mann, that there was a novel that was a sequel to Heat. And so I think was it just called Heat 2?
Yeah, that's what it's called.
So they got creative with the title.
Right.
And but I think Tom is going to check it out because that was his recommendation for a movie in the last episode. And thanks, Joe Pay. You're maybe we should put him on payroll or something. He could
keep that down. He will absolutely ask for a raise before he gets a job. But he did recommend it, and I found it like it's very inexpensive on Apple Books or whatever it's called, and I've already purchased it. I'm going to read it just because I love that movie, and apparently it's part prequel, part sequel, and Joe gave me a call almost immediately after hearing the episode because he wanted me to know that was out there. And then finally, I did want to point out, because I was confused or just uninformed. I did recommend Blood on the Tracks, the remake by Mary Louise Corvette of the Bob Dylan album. And there was a song where towards the end of the album, I think she was just getting tired, and she had people from the audience stand up and sing verses of a song, and it's just kind of funny. It's a little comic relief within there because they're all doing their worst Bob Dylan imitations. The song was Lily Rosemary and the Jack of Hearts, which is crazy long. It's track 7 on the original album and this remake. And I just wanted to point it out. I would recommend listening to the whole album anyway, but I just found that really funny. It was kind of a cool little thing she did. Like I said, I think she did it just so she could take a break. But I couldn't remember which song it was last time.
All righty. And on to the core of our show, which is the playlist. So in each episode, Tom and I make a choice, we each make a playlist choice. Again, ideally will fit the theme. It could be somewhat of a loose fit. And in season 1, we did play the songs on the podcast. We have decided that we're hoping to expand to several platforms, and it makes much more difficult to play songs, whereas Spotify was very generous with its policy for allowing you to play songs if you had the podcast on Spotify. That did cause some problems for users, because someone like me who has a premium account, I would hear the entire song. Someone who didn't may only hear 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and we didn't have control over which part of the song played. So there were some QA, issues anyway. I loved it, so I'd listen, especially the song I chose. But I would, so what we're gonna do is continue to build out a playlist. Season 1 has a playlist with 20 songs, so all the songs that we recommended for our playlist in those episodes is available on Spotify. I just put it up on YouTube Music, and we'll try to put it in some other places and make it available. Lastly, and sorry for the long introduction, I'm finishing up some of the details on our website and hope to have that up within the week. And we'd also make reference to the playlist there as well. So, Tom, I believe that you have the first choice of the playlist for this season.
All right. So my first choice for the season 2 playlist is a song called Too Drunk to Dream. It's by a band called Gas Money, and it came out in 2004. This, I think, is a nice beginning to our season 2 playlist for a couple reasons. First of all, because I caught hell from a listener because I was told we never play any rock and roll or never choose any rock and roll for our playlist. And this is a very upbeat. It's got your crunchy guitar. It's amplified, and it's a very rock and roll song, which is kind of ironic because it was not written as a rock and roll song. It was written, and it is the cover of the song Too Drunk to Dream by Whiskeytown, which is nothing if not kind of a slower, very country Americana type band. So I considered this song final episode of the other season when we talked about covers, because it's one of my favorite covers of a Whiskeytown song. Decided not to use it, but felt like it was a very good choice for this topic because of the lyrics dealing with, basically, drinking yourself to sleep and of course being lonely, because we talk a lot about being lonely on this podcast for some reason. But it's it also may relate someday in the future. We've talked about a topic in the future relating to problematic artists, artists who are not good people who have made great art. And the lead singer of Whiskeytown way back in the early 90s, late 80s, I think he started, is Ryan Adams, who was Me Too'd and apparently is not the nicest guy in the world. But man, he can write a song. And I felt much better about recommending Gas Money singing this song at this point than maybe I would about Ryan Adams. So I do recommend Too Drunk to Dream. This song, as well as Chris's pick, will be put up on our Spotify playlist, as well as any other playlist we can create. And I hope you enjoy it. Chris?
Thank you. I also listened to the song beforehand. Love it. It's a great version. And I was sitting there going, I know this song. And then I looked it up, and it was Whiskeytown. And you and I hit on the exact same, idea right at the same time. That I've not listened to a lot of Whiskeytown or Ryan Adams, which is a change. He was, pretty heavy in my rotation before. I agree with Tom. He writes some great songs. I think the only song I've listened to is he's listed as the second. He's a collaborator. Is it Caitlin Carey? Was that who was in Whiskeytown with him?
Yes.
And she's the primary artist, and I don't know why I felt she got a little overlooked in Whiskeytown, and so something called The Battle. It's a really good song. That's pretty much the only one that's in my favorites anymore that has his name attached to it.
Mhm.
All right, I went with a Canadian. You might be surprised by that. Gentleman named Joe Nolan, who is from Fort fuck. All right, here we go.
Oh, that's staying
Not
in,
quite
buddy.
a post facto. That's just that I can't talk. All right, Joe is from Fort Saskatchewan. I was fine with Saskatchewan, but once you throw Fort in front of it, it just threw the syllables off. Sorry about that, Joe. You're from Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta. True to form, it's not the most uplifting song in the world. It is about wanting to be in love. He clearly is not with the person he wants to be. It just has I don't know how to describe this because I don't know music as well, but it just flows so nicely. It certainly has some repetition. There's a YouTube video out there of him singing it. This is one of those sessions like they do like with Our Vinyl and some of those others where they record artists in different settings. And this is easily my favorite song of his. Just the lyrics, the flow of the song, his voice. Definitely recommend. We don't give egg burritos because we said if we wouldn't be putting these on our playlist if they weren't up there, but this one is easily a 5 for me. It's just a great song, makes me happy, even though it's kind of a sad song in some ways. But what's interesting, and I'm taking credit for it, is on Spotify, he only has, it's either Spotify or YouTube Music. He doesn't have a lot of followers, and he has less than 800 listens to this song. And I know that he didn't have that many a couple months ago. So I'm pretty sure that I'm responsible for getting this one song into his top 5 songs on a streaming service. So if you're out there listening to us, Joe, free ticket to a concert or something.
Why don't you like our damn podcast, man? That's hilarious that you single-handedly have done that.
I'm speculating, but
I think that's awesome.
I think I'm pretty close. So again, this will be on our playlists for sure on Spotify and YouTube Music. But we'll try to put it out as many different places as we can, including on our website in the next week or so.
Yeah, and again, a reminder to everyone: this is our 2nd season. Chris and I really enjoy doing this, and we're hoping that people are getting at least something out of it. The best thing you could do for us is to follow us on whatever podcast platform that you're listening to it right now. If you could rate us, give us 5 stars, and if you've got comments to make, depending on whatever the platform is, please get them to us. We'll look at every single one of them and incorporate everything we can. We are in the process, and when I say we, I mean Chris is in the process of creating a website where we'll be able to list stuff that we've recommended, stuff that we've talked about, have some kind of as mentioned page so that you can go there and hopefully find links to other stuff that we found interesting, and hopefully you will as well. And that's all to come. We're very hopeful that by the end of this season that we'll have the website up and running, and you'll have various places to find the playlist. So as always, thank you for listening to Third Song In with Chris and Tom.
You bastard.
See?
I mean, how do I get editing right so I can take out some of the stupid shit that
Just,
I said?
tell me what you want, and if you want me to change something, I'll think about it.